Coffee has two temperatures. Scald your face off hot or ice cold. Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing the Perfect Palette 2 tag. Or Perfect Palette tag part 2. Whatever. Perfect Palette tag. My friend Heather tagged me from Love Heatherette, so thank you, Heather. My answers are going to be pretty boring, I'm going to tell you that right now. But if you guys want to see my boring answers, then just keep watching. The first question is, I got it on my phone, I'm sorry, I can't read that far away. Eyeliner, brush, or nothing. And they mean, you know, when you buy a palette, do you prefer if there's an eyeliner, or brush, or nothing? I personally prefer if there's nothing. I don't ever find the brushes useful. Some are more usable than others, but in general, I think they're just not my favorite. And then I don't really care about the eyeliner. I have 1,000 pencil eyeliners. I don't need any more. So I prefer nothing. Question number 2, a palette that you've hit pan on. Well, normally I would be like, none. But I'm actually panning a palette this year, so I've hit pan on one palette exactly. And you know this palette. This is the Lorac Resort palette. I've hit pan on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and almost, I'm super close on this guy. The only way I'm probably ever going to hit pan on a palette is if I pan the palette in its entirety. Holy moly, that's a tongue twister. Because the way I use palettes, I don't just use one palette for like one eyeshadow and like get a different palette for a different eyeshadow. I like palettes that I can do an entire eye look with and not have to add anything else to it. If I do, if I want to add something, that's one thing, but I don't want to have to do that. That's why I don't buy all shimmer palettes. I want to use this palette for everything. So that's my favorite type of palette. That should be a question. It's not. Question number 3, favorite naked palette. And I know this doesn't mean, it doesn't have to be an Urban Decay naked palette, but just a neutral palette. For me, it is going to be my Urban Decay naked palette. The quality of these shadows, it's pretty phenomenal because it's Urban Decay. And it's just like you can do kind of a lot of things with this palette that are neutral, but also if you wanted to do something darker, you could. This is my favorite naked palette. Question number 4, favorite holiday or limited edition palette. I think this is considered a holiday palette. This is the Bare Minerals, the Regal Wardrobe, and I actually bought this last year, or Christmas 2015, but I love this palette. It's got 4 cheek colors and then the 8 eyeshadows. I love this palette. The shadows are really, really nice. This cognac color is like, oh yes. Cognac and Romp are 2 of my favorites, and then there's mattes in here as well, and then the 4 cheek colors. It's very compact. You could probably put this in your purse if you wanted. I don't want to, but you could. And I just love that palette. It's one of my favorite. I think that's probably the only holiday palette I have, except for the Bare Minerals holiday palette from the previous year, which I also love, but I like the Regal Wardrobe better. Question number 5, a palette you would repurchase or wish you had a backup. I don't really have an answer for this. It would probably be the naked palette. Like if I ever use a complete naked palette, I would repurchase it, but I don't really see that happening anytime soon, so I guess the Urban Decay naked palette, but I don't really have a set in stone answer. Question number 6, a shade you wish was sold individually. And again, I don't have an answer for that because, like I said, if I don't use one shade from one palette and then another shade from another palette, I want to use the whole palette. So if it's just one shade, then I'm probably not going to use that palette anyway. Question number 7, a wild card. Pick a question from the original Perfect Palette tag to answer again. And so I'm going to pick the biggest regret. It's not a regret because I dislike the shadows or the quality. It's just a regret because I don't use it, and it was definitely a hyped up thing that I purchased because of YouTube and Instagram and, you know, all of those social media things that I have to blame most of my impulse purchases on. But that is the Morphe Jaclyn Hill Favorites palette. I like this palette, but I'm not going to use a good chunk of these colors, like these super orange colors. I think I've used this palette. I had it in my palette of the week last year, and I think that was probably the only time I've ever really used it. It's just not something that I reach for. And then question number 8, the palette you would recommend to a friend. Without choosing the Urban Decay Naked palette again, probably the It Cosmetics Naturally Pretty Celebration palette, because these are all mattes, and then there's this transforming shade so you could add some sheen. I love this palette. These are really great eyeshadows. If you don't want that one, I also really love the Bare Minerals Ready eyeshadows, the 8.0 eyeshadow palettes. This is the one that I have in the Posh Neutrals, but I really like the other, I think there's 2 other versions as well. I really like these, and they're neutrals, but they're pretty neutrals and they're good quality. So I would recommend either of these. That was the perfect palette to tag. I know my answers are super lame, but I'm super lame, so whatever. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave your answers to the questions down below if you want, and I will talk to you guys later.